The latest image generation models like ChatGPT Image 2, Nano Banana, and Seedream 5.0 all work well with natural language prompts. You just describe what you want just like you were telling a human. Like aerial photo of a dog driving a red convertible on the highway. Not a choppy list like dog convertible highway, followed by a bunch of buzzwords. Prompts can be written as one-liners, a paragraph, or multiple paragraphs, or a structured format where it's broken down into sections. When I say a one-liner, I mean something like photo of a man sitting on a bench. The paragraph style has more detail and it's just written out in a paragraph or multiple paragraphs. A structured format has labeled sections like scene, subject, and so on, and the prompt gets broken down into each of these sections. In this video, I'm going to give you the structured format that I've been working with. I developed it originally for ChatGPT Image 2, but I found that it's also working well with Nano Banana and Seedream 5.0. And I'll also show you an even easier way to turn a short or messy prompt into a structured format with one click in OpenArt. OpenArt's a sponsor of this video. It's my favorite platform for creating and editing AI images and videos. OpenArt has all the latest models and lots of cool tools to help you create visual assets and put together a visual story. Now you can get great images from a one-liner, a paragraph-style prompt, or the structured format. A one-liner simple prompt is good when you want to see what the model comes up with, or you don't know exactly what you want until you see it and then you know what you don't want. The thing to remember is anything you don't specify, you're leaving up to the model to decide. For instance, in this one-liner prompt, I said a photo of a man sitting on a bench. That left it up to the model to decide what kind of photo, what the man looked like from his age to his clothing, what kind of bench he was sitting on, and what environment it was in. Not to mention lighting, time of day, other people, or objects in the environment, and so on. With the paragraph style format, you're including more description and details about the image you want to have more control over the output. In the man on a bench example, the paragraph style prompt narrowed things down, like the photo style being a selfie, the bench being at a bus stop, and what the man should look like. So what's the point of a structured format if we can just write out all the details in a paragraph or multiple paragraphs? Well, if you're writing your prompt from scratch, the structured format gives you the section labels to help you remember what parts you need to cover in your prompt. It also gives the image generation model clear sections, which hopefully makes it easier for the model to understand. And when you want to make a change to an image, because it rarely comes out the way you want on the first try, it's a lot easier to find the place where you want to make the change or add the detail if it's broken down into these sections rather than hunting through a bunch of big long paragraphs. The man on the bench images came out very similar using the paragraph style and the structured format because those prompts contained essentially the same information. The structured format just makes it a little easier to write without forgetting stuff, and a little easier to edit when you're iterating. So here's the structured format I've been using. It has 5 sections: scene, subject, important details, use case or medium, and constraints. The point of the scene section is to answer the question, where are we? On a mountain, in a living room, on a city street? And if we're in a city, is it a big city, is it a specific city, or is it a generalized city in a specific country? And what's in the scene? Are there people in the background? Is it a dining room? Are there cars going by? Not in the dining room, but if we were doing the city thing. Anyway, what time of day is it? What's the weather? Now, the time of day and weather might sound like things that only apply to outdoor scenes, but they actually do influence indoor scenes in many cases. If the room that we're in or the environment has windows, whether they're visible in the frame or they're just presumed to be windows in that room, but they're not within the scene, the lighting in that room will be rendered different if you say sunny day than if you say stormy night. If you're creating an infographic or an ad or something like that, then here in the scene is where you could describe the background, the overall layout, the color scheme, things like that. The subject is the star of the show, the person or thing we want to see, the reason we're creating the image. And the subject can be more than one person or object, it can be a couple, a group of people, or a room full of furniture. You can be as vague or descriptive about your subject as you want. Just remember, any detail you don't provide, you're leaving up to the model to decide. You could use a prompt as simple as a woman, which could produce an image of a woman anywhere from 18 to 108 years old. She might have red hair or blonde hair, she might be wearing shorts and a t-shirt, or a floral muumuu. She might be Caucasian, Asian, African, or something else. She might be tall and slender. Hello, olive oil. Or short and rotund. And if you're like some guys I know, you really don't care. As long as it's a living, breathing woman, that's fine. Anyway, if you're not quite sure what you want, or you just can't figure out how to put into words that vague image you have in your head, then starting with something like a woman is perfectly fine. Once you see what the model came up with, it might be easier to see what you want, if nothing else, by seeing what you didn't want but couldn't think of. Or maybe that's just me. The model produces a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman in her 20s, and I'm like, oh no, she should have been Asian with dark hair and brown eyes and been in her 30s. Why I couldn't think of that from scratch, I'll never know. Now, even if you don't get too descriptive about your subject's appearance, you probably want to include something about what they're doing and how they're interacting with the scene. If you made your scene a living room with a blue sofa, then here in your subject description, you might have the woman laying on the blue sofa, tying it back to that scene description so that the model knows where to put her. There's a whole lot of ways somebody could be laying, is it lying or laying? Anyway, on a sofa. They can be asleep, watching TV, relaxing, reading a book, scrolling on their phone, camped out there while they're sick, and so on. And each one of these creates a different picture, a different pose, different objects in the scene, a different facial expression. The current models are pretty good at handling this stuff if you just give them a context clue like she's laying on the couch reading a book. Fortunately, we don't have to say she's lying on her back, head on a pillow, legs fully extended, arms raised slightly holding a book in front of her face, and all that detail. I would only do that if you need a very specific pose and it's not getting it after a few tries with the laying on the couch reading a book, because that's where you can end up with the issue of too many details making the image worse, not better. Important details is where you would describe the materials or textures of the things that you put in those other sections. So if you put a blue sofa in the scene, here in the important details, you might say the blue sofa is a soft chenille fabric. Whatever that means, because I don't know anything about fabric, so I assume chenille is soft, but maybe that's a contradiction in itself. If you have a color palette or want specific colors, describe those here. You can also use hex codes. Most of the modern models understand those now. This is also the spot to get fancy with the style if that's what you're into, like adding an orange and teal color grade, or having the party lights in the background blur to a bokeh effect. The use case medium is probably my favorite section because I can't tell you how many times I've written a prompt, thought I covered everything, and then the image comes out as a watercolor or some other crap when I wanted a photorealistic and thought it should have been able to read my mind. But I guess I'm glad it can't read my mind yet because I can't afford the amount of psychiatric care that I'd be ordered to attend if it could. Having this little section here helps remind me to tell it what kind of image I want, a documentary photo, product photography, an infographic, or whatever. Also, telling it the use case instead of or in addition to the medium has been really helpful. It seems to unlock a lot of contextual information for the model that makes it more likely to produce an image that has the look and feel I wanted, even if I don't quite know how to put that into words. If I say I'm using this image for a social media ad or a Facebook ad, it comes out different than if I say I'm using it as a magazine ad, or if I don't say anything at all about the use and just describe the composition and what's included. Likewise, editorial photos, fashion photos, documentary photos, cinematic stills, they each have their own flavor. And you can often get that flavor without adding the herbs and spices into your prompt individually by just telling the model what you plan to use the image for. And this is especially helpful if you sort of know the style you're going for, but you don't know what it's called. Here in the important details, you can also put your desired aspect ratio like 1:1 square, 9:16 vertical, or whatever, but be careful, most of the platforms have an aspect ratio setting that's separate from the prompt, even though it might be sort of in the prompt box or beside it or whatever. So if that setting is set on 16:9, but then in your prompt you say 1:1 aspect ratio, the model's got to deal with both of those instructions. Sometimes it'll pick one or the other, sometimes it'll do really weird things. Ask me how I know. Constraints is where you put the deal breakers, and often the things that you wouldn't even think about unless you've had an AI image model produce something that made you think, what the is that? And if you've created a few AI images, you've probably experienced something like this. Extra text you didn't ask for, adding a logo or watermark, or if you're using a reference image, completely changing the characteristics of your character. Constraints can be positive, like preserve the identity of the subject from the reference image, or they can be negative, like no exaggerated expressions. And when it comes to the AI-specific habits, like random logos and watermarks, those are becoming less of an issue with the modern models, so I generally leave that out unless I have that problem in my generations, and then I'll add that in the constraints. Because I don't want my prompt to be any longer than it has to be for the model to understand what I want, and my hypothesis is that every additional word is another opportunity to confuse the model. And sometimes AI image generation models will seem to ignore the word no and pick up the word right after it. So if you say no watermarks, now it'll see the word watermark, ignore the word no, and put a watermark in where it wouldn't have if I hadn't said no watermarks. I think GPT Image 2 is probably doing the best at accurately interpreting the negative stuff like the no text, no watermark, no extra people. Now this structured format that I'm showing you isn't the only one out there. It's not necessarily the best. It happens to be the one that I use, my version. You might want to make some tweaks to it to suit you, or tweak another version that you find that works best for you, or you can get a structured format in one click while you're generating the image on OpenArt. We're on the homepage of OpenArt. Over here we'll click Image to go to the image generation page. Let me clear out what I have in there. We'll give it something really simple. We'll say a man on a motorcycle. And then right down here we have this magic wand that says Enhance Prompt. We'll click that. And then OpenArt adds detail to our prompt and puts it in a structured format. Their sections are a little bit different than mine. They use subject, action, environment, cinematography, lighting and style, and technical. But it serves the same purpose, breaking the prompt down into sections, making sure that you cover all the categories, and making it easier for us to make changes to, find the spots where we want to change or add details, rather than pouring through paragraphs of text. It's probably a good idea to look through that enhanced structured prompt and make any changes you want. When we give it something as simple as a man on a motorcycle, that could go in a lot of different directions, so you want to make sure the direction it picked lines up with something you'll want. The good news is you're getting these ideas and making these changes before you spend the credits to generate the image, so you're saving a little time and money over generating, looking at it and saying, oh yeah, no, that's not what I wanted, let me change this and try again. If you want to use my structured format, I've created a meta prompt that you can use with your AI, ChatGPT or whatever, and it'll tell it to take a one-liner or messy prompt and turn it into a neat and tidy image generation prompt in my structured format. Just copy and paste it into ChatGPT or whatever LLM you use, replace the line short or messy prompt with your short or messy prompt, and hit the go button. There's a link in the description, it's free, and I hope you find it useful. Bonus tips. I found a few things that can really wreck an image generation, so I've got a few bonus tips for you that'll hopefully help you avoid the mistakes I've made and get to the good stuff quicker. My first tip is to beware of contradictions. In my video on ChatGPT Image 2, I did a magazine cover and I specified the text for the masthead, which was wired, and the subheading, which was the builders. I also said to include a pull quote, but didn't specify the text for that. I wanted the model to just make it up. And it probably would have, except that later in the prompt in the constraints section, I said verbatim text, no extra words, no duplicate text. So in one place, I'm telling it to make up text, and in another place, I'm telling it absolutely do not make up any text. Reminds me of my first wife. The model handled that by making a graphical pull quote block without any text, which is a really smart way to resolve my contradictory prompt, but not at all what I wanted. Bonus tip number 2 is that more isn't always better. Modern models like ChatGPT Image 2, Nano Banana and Seedream 5.0 have real-world knowledge, and they go through this thinking mode before they start generating the image. This makes them much better than older models at putting things in the right places with better spatial relationships and incorporating the details that just make the image look right, even when we don't explicitly describe those details in the prompt. I've found that if I get overly detailed, the models give priority to doing what I asked for at the cost of accuracy sometimes. For example, kitchens and bathrooms are still a little bit unstable, even for the latest models. If I do too much explaining about where I want the windows, walls, and cabinets and whatnot, it creates an image that makes no sense and just screams AI. The same goes for adding background objects or props. Unless I need something specific on a counter or laying on the ground, I'm probably better off just letting the model figure out what should be on the counter in the background instead of specifically telling it a coffee maker, a mug, a toaster, and whatever. If you like the idea of the structured format prompt and you like the convenience of being able to do it in one click, they're in OpenArt. They have several plans available. They're all on sale right now. The Infinite is probably the sweet spot of the plans. With the sale, it's $43.70 a month if you pay annually, or it's $56 a month if you pay monthly. Over on the Wonder plan, which is a bit more expensive, they do offer unlimited generation right now with Seedream 5.0 Pro and Nano Banana 2 Lite. Now, those are limited time deals, and these change out. OpenArt frequently offers unlimited generations to Wonder tier subscribers for some of the newest or fairly new models. You might have noticed when we were on the OpenArt homepage, they rolled out a new tool called Director, and it's like vibe coding, but for making AI videos. You just chat with it, tell it what you want, what to change, and produce a video. I hope to have a video on that tool for you real soon. There's a helicopter that must be flying in circles over my house while I'm trying to record, no other time of day. It's like somebody sends out some kind of message, Bob's recording, get your helicopter and go fly around over his house. Hey, my name's Bob. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you found this video helpful or at least entertaining, and I hope you'll come back and join me for another video.